A plane touches down. Inside, a fortune in cash. On the ground, a crew that knows exactly when, exactly where, and exactly how long they have. They were not impulsive men. They were patient. Quiet. For months they had lived at the edges of Santiago's International Airport, learning its routine the way a watchmaker learns a gear's last click. Which doors actually opened? Which lanes were ignored when the night shift grew tired? Which moments were busy enough that no one truly looked? They chose their target because it moved money, not stories. A Lufthansa cargo flight, a workhorse of finance, arriving with an international shipment of cash intended for banks and armored transit inside the country. No glamour. Just sealed containers. Pallets. Paper that ruled everything once it reached the street. On paper they were ordinary. A mechanic who kept his head down. A driver who never talked more than necessary. A warehouse hand who lifted, nodded, and vanished on lunch breaks. In reality they shared a single idea. One operation, done cleanly, could pull them out of the lives they no longer wanted. No outbursts. No weapons. Just nerve and timing. The idea came from a man who understood the rhythm of cargo work. He knew the gap between touchdown and transfer. He knew that busy nights produced blind spots. He also knew that money like this never waited long. Once the armored trucks arrived, the window slammed shut. He didn't recruit dreamers. He called in operators. Men who could keep their hands steady, say little, and move when the second hand told them to move. They met away from the city, a rented space with no history, and built the job from silence. No speeches. No nicknames. No bravado. Just a wall of notes, arrival times, staffing patterns, and how chaos looks from far away. They would not break in. They would blend in. Not with forged systems and theatrical tricks, but with something simpler. They would lean on visual similarity to the authorized personnel and the type of vehicle that belonged in that zone. From a distance, under light and noise, routine wins. People see what they expect to see. The window was narrow. Less than 30 minutes from landing to transfer. Inside that slice of time they had to appear, load, and disappear without creating a moment that felt unusual. That became the heart of their practice. Erase the feeling of unusual. They prepared roles the way a stage crew prepares a scene. Who gives hand signals? Who positions the pallet jack? Who watches the clock without looking like he's watching the clock? They planned contingencies, main routes, service lanes, a quiet turn into the industrial district. Not because they wanted to play hero, but because traffic lights fail and radios crackle and nerves make people hesitate. They did not talk about what came after. They agreed on this much. Money would be secured first, divided later. The plan survives when the plan is simple. March 2019. Night air. Lights humming on the apron. Engines cooling. The cargo plane arrived when it was supposed to arrive. A shift leader somewhere signed a form. A forklift somewhere moved its forks. The operation began before anyone called it an operation. It was just work, the city's constant breathing, and inside that breath the crew stepped into the rhythm they had studied for months. A truck rolled toward the working area. It looked like it belonged. Not a perfect imitation. Just close enough in shape and purpose that eyes slid off of it. Two men stepped out with the calm of people who have done the same thing 100 times. No rush. No swagger. Just the posture of routine. Containers were brought across the gap. The men moved as if their bodies knew the weight before their hands touched it. They kept their pace steady, never too fast, never too slow, and let the noise of the airfield cover what little sound they made. If anyone looked, they saw busy men in a busy place. From a distance, under light and noise, routine won again. Minutes. Not many. Enough. The last crate slid into place. The door closed with a sound that could have been any door, on any night, in any city. The driver set his hands on the wheel the way he always set his hands on the wheel. The truck rolled out, took the turn it was supposed to take, and merged into the thin stream of vehicles that feed an airport's veins. Silence followed. The kind of silence that means a plan has held. By the time someone cross-checked a note against a roster, the vehicle was gone. What came up on the investigator's screen wasn't a siren, it was a question. Why does this entry time not align with the standard register? Why does this plate not echo back the way it should? One discrepancy. That's all it takes to turn a routine night into a report. The crew slipped into the city's harder lines. Warehouses, loading bays, Metal doors that carry no names. Money was moved once more, quickly, and made to vanish into places that can hold a secret. Not forever. Just long enough. At first it looked clean. But silence never holds for long. Investigators arrived before the sun had weight. They pulled access logs and camera frames. They spoke to men who were trained to notice the unusual, and to men who could not remember who had waved which truck through. The story built itself the way all stories do. Piece by piece, with gaps that bother you until they stop bothering you and a few details that never fit anywhere at all. The media called it bold. The police called it planned. The men inside the crew called it dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with the night itself. Dangerous because after the act comes the waiting. After the waiting comes the pressure. And pressure changes people. They kept their distance from one another. No calls. No habits. They tried not to think about division, but money that large weighs on the mind. Bills are paper. Fortunes are heavy. You can hide paper. You have to manage a fortune. Then the first real problem surfaced where problems usually surface. Not in the airport, but on the edges of the city where people abandon things when they have to think fast. A vehicle turned up where it should not have turned up. A fingerprint where you do not want a fingerprint. Not a confession. Just the start of a line that an investigator could follow with patience. One man pulled away from the agreed routine. He stopped answering. He changed the way he moved through his days. Fear explains those choices, but fear also looks like betrayal to the people who want to believe they are safe. The group that had moved like a single decision began to move like separate nerves. Search warrants landed. Homes were opened to lights at the wrong hour. Phones went silent, then started ringing under names the owners did not recognize. Bank movements, the kind that look like celebration when you are not supposed to be celebrating anything, drew attention. Purchases that felt like rewards looked like signals to the people reading spreadsheets. A man talked. Not a speech. Fragments. Enough to sharpen what the investigators already suspected. The circle tightened. A warehouse hand was pulled in. A driver with old ties that never really break was pulled in. Then a connection closer to the logistics chain. Not a mastermind, not a ghost, just a person who knew how work becomes habit and how habit becomes blind. Some tried to run. Borders are not far if you have fuel and nerve. But borders are not just lines on the ground. They are questions at counters and cameras on poles and the simple, human problem of sleep. Others hid their shares in places they believed would not give them away. Rural properties that no one asked about, spaces behind walls that no one tapped. Money slept where no one was supposed to find it. Not all of it was found. That became public. It always does. The announcement had the shape of victory but the content of a dare. Arrests have been made, but a significant portion of the cash remains unaccounted for. Rumors followed because rumors always follow money. Someone took more. Someone kept more. Someone talked too much. Someone didn't talk at all. The trials stretched. The story that had been lived in minutes was retold in months. Prosecutors described what they could prove. A discrepancy in access logs and entry times. A vehicle that fit the picture from far away. A crew that used the noise and speed of the airport to fold themselves into its background. It wasn't a legend. It was logistics, used against the very system that wrote the schedule. Sentences landed. Not for everyone, not equally. Some men took deals and exchanged years for words. Some stared at walls that would not move. Some names never reached the press. That is how these things end for most people. Not with applause, not with a headline, just with a file. What remained was the question that bothers everyone more than any verdict. Where did all the money go? A fraction was recovered. Enough to hold up at a podium. Not enough to calm the imagination. The rest dissolved into lives that learned how to spend slowly. Into businesses that do not draw attention. Into places where cash looks like old savings, not new risk. There is no romance in it. There is no lesson about the brave or the brilliant. There is only the math of pressure and the simple truth that routine can be used, for a few minutes by people who study it carefully enough. In March 2019, at Santiago's airport, a group of men proved that timing, disguised by routine, and silence can make millions disappear faster than most people can describe what they just saw. The law arrived, as it always does. It gathered names and years and pieces of evidence. It did not gather everything. The legend that remains is not a celebration. It is a warning told in a quiet voice. Every perfect job leaves a line to follow, even if it takes time to see the line.